01E37 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. If I wanted to play myself, I'd just go out into the real world.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host, an old wise woman who's seen a thing or two in her day, Adam.
I'm your curmudgeonly loner male with a dark past, Sarah.
And I'm your extraplanar being that doesn't understand binary gender, Tom.
I love that. Welcome to the show, guys. Thank you for being on. Yeah, just a quick update from last night. No new deaths this time, so we're having a good time in Avernus. We were a little worried. I had just received my miniature in the mail, and after Ben had his character killed off immediately after getting his miniature, I have to admit I was on edge for much of the night. So I'm glad that we're all alive, and welcome back to Porto. Ben's character is now back with us. Interesting to find out what kind of deal he made to come back, but I'm sure that will be fleshed out. How are you guys feeling about Porto being back?
I'm super stoked, especially because I know that it had to come at a cost, and Ben is really, really good at, he has an awesome poker face, and he never, ever lets on the things until it's time. So I can't wait to find out. There might be subtle ways he will already start playing that, that cost is starting to show, but we just need to pay attention to it. So
Yeah, and the shocking thing is we almost left without finding him. Like we were ready to just get out of this part of town, and Steve is trying desperately to get us to go down to the basement because that's where Porto was locked in a coffin, and we're like, no, it's too dangerous. Let's go.
we looked at the basement. We're like, oh, there's a bunch of boxes here, but let's go search upstairs
nothing
first.
There. Yeah, let's get out of here.
To be fair, we're in hell, as we've established many times, and around almost quite literally every corner is something trying to kill us.
Yes.
And it's a grind of, trying to survive every threat. So we're not really keen on exploring because we're
definitely
too
not one of those campaigns
of what's trying to kill us next, which is understandable. I mean, I think Steve is doing a really, really good job of bringing home that, this is hell. This is, you're in enemy territory. You need to be afraid. You need to be careful, and you need to be smart.
Well, and we had just finished fighting off 5 vampires or something, or 4 vampires and some fiend or whatever. I mean, we were not feeling good about things. So it wasn't shocking that we wanted to get out of town, but regardless, we managed to find Porto, and he's back with the group. We're all back together again, and happy about it. But it's an interesting campaign. We'll see who falls next, but I'm just hoping it's not me because miniatures are expensive, and I really don't want to retire this one.
Your new miniature looks awesome, though.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy with it. Hero Forge, you are definitely stepping up your game with these colored miniatures. It makes all the difference in the world. We got to get them as a sponsor or something, right? So anyway, let's get into the topic for the day. Tabletop role-playing, and especially D&D, doesn't have the greatest history when it comes to issues of sex and gender. A couple episodes back, we talked about sex in tabletop role-playing games, and there's some interesting history that we went over there, but it's rapidly changing, which is great to see. Not only has there been a significant influx of female players, but the LGBTQ plus community has also seen a huge increase in making up our player base. So we thought we'd get into the interesting topic today of role-playing a character that is a different gender than your own. Now, just to preface, I know I'm probably going to make some mistakes here, like terminology and such, due to my own ignorance. I'm still learning. So apologies in advance, and I'll work hard to correct anything that I get wrong. But to the topic at hand, one of the best things I noted about our group early on was how much of a non-issue it was that players were role-playing characters with genders different from their own. It may be a simple thing, but it's surprising how many people have trouble with this. Tom, you played a female character your first go-around with this group, Brooke. Was that an intentional choice on your part, or did that character just happen to be female?
Just happened to be female.
Which is the best way, right?
Yeah,
that's great. That it's almost an afterthought, right?
Yeah, it was basically because one thing I do is I kind of mill around with different character ideas, concepts, classes, races, anything, and I normally will start with like a picture or like some sort of artist rendition or portrait, and try to create my own headcanon of who that person is. And then I build out from there. So I basically was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, this character, and started kind of building the character from just different images. D&D characters, bards. I knew I was going to play a bard to some capacity. And I found one that I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And it kind of clicked. It just, the ideas flowed and the character kind of built themselves. And it was so easy that I was like, okay, yeah, that's the character I went with. It wasn't really a plan of, well, this is gonna be their personality, or this is gonna be their gender and how that ties to the personality. It's more of, so this is a person and this is what their backstory is. Oh, this is kind of their humor. This is their creativity. And just went from there. Like, it wasn't really, and a lot of her kind of just built in as I went. It was, it was weird in that this was my first real, like, more role play heavy campaign that I was in. And it was interesting, as I was playing, I was coming up with ideas on the fly, and I was certain, this is who she was. This is what she was about. And if you would have asked me 30 seconds before that, I wouldn't have really been able to tell you the answer, but it kind of flowed as it went.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Hey, Tom, did you modify your play like deliberately at all, or do you feel like she kind of just came to life, like you said, in the sense that when you were playing her, were you thinking, this is what a girl character would do, or were you just playing her? Because for me, as Mina, Brooke was her best friend, and I love Brooke to this day. I love that character, and I felt like their friendship was very natural and very reminiscent of friendships I've had with my girlfriend. So I was just wondering, was any of your choices deliberate from the role play, or was it just natural and organic?
It was just natural. It's is again that kind of second skin of embodying the character and coming to a innate realization is, oh, this person is in this situation, how would they react, and just going with whatever the gut feeling was.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, question for you. Like, coming into that first group, there were a couple players, I think, playing a different gender. What was your take as a female coming into a group of all men, seeing males role play females?
I found it really refreshing, to be honest, because coming back into it, I still had very, I don't know, like the memory of very sexist sort of behaviors around D&D. I couldn't play with kids when I was an adolescent because I wasn't one of the boys, and then when I got old enough, we just kind of had our own group of girls that were playing. So for me to see people gender bending and doing it well was really, really comforting. And I was actually really heartened by the fact that, our group wasn't super sexist in even like necessarily the environment, which it's not to say that, if you want your D&D campaign set in like a more of a gender-based world, because that's closer to like maybe the European sort of history that you want to explore, or that sort of fantasy, there's nothing wrong with that if that's where the world is set. But it was really cool to me to be like, you know what, this woman is Roxanne's a paladin, and she kicks ass, and she's awesome. And I think actually half the group was men playing women, which was really cool.
I believe so. Yeah, it was really cool. You had Nick with Shy, and Matt with Roxana, and Tom with Brooke. Yeah, I think that was all the female characters, well, other than Mina, of course. But yeah, I think it was about half and half, which was great. Really great to see.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was one of those silent things that makes me feel more welcome, if that makes sense. Like, it's just like the environment, like this sofa I'm sitting on is way more comfortable than I expected. So thank you, that kind of thing.
Well, we're certainly glad to have the female perspective in all this as well. As males, we are privileged because hey, what's out there is normally us, so we don't have a good understanding of what it's like to not see a representation of us in the games that we play, and having those different voices at the table is so cool. I love it, and definitely need more of it. But let's get into some questions for the week about this. Let's dive in a little bit. Our first post comes from Reddit user Hangry Potato Man, I can relate, who asks, how to roleplay NPCs of the opposite gender. I started my third campaign yesterday, so I'm still fairly new, but have some experience DMing. I always try to do voices for all of my NPCs. I practice my accents and feel I have gotten pretty good at creating a convincing voice of many different accents. The only problem is females. It always comes out as what it is, a guy trying to sound like a girl. I know it's not that important, but I have major female NPC coming up in the next 2 or 3 sessions, and I really want her to be a convincing character. Any help would be very much appreciated. All right, Sarah. So a male DM trying to do a female voice, anything he should watch out for or keep in mind here?
So Hangry Potato Man, I definitely feel you. My men, I worry my men all sound the same for the same reason. It's like I just do a deeper voice, but it probably just sounds like Sarah talking. My advice would be to your character's going to come through in more than just your voice. So don't forget, obviously, like your body language and stuff like that is really going to sell that this character is female. But you have voice options. Going higher is a nice touch, and I think that's generally what most of our male players have done, right, with their female characters. Mm-hmm. You can do something a little bit more like breathy and kind of soft, or you can be a little bit like super high pitch, like go like I don't know, like Japanese schoolgirl anime kind of high pitch if you want. But you have a range, and don't forget though, like it's just, again, it's going to be more than just your voice. It's going to be your body language, the tilt of your head if you decide to do that. That's going to also, that whole experience of embodying that character is going to come through. So don't stress too much about the voice. Just find something that's very comfortable and that you feel fits the character, and go with it.
Yeah, and that's good advice just in general, that a lot of times we put too much emphasis on the voice. Like, it's fun and it's really interesting, and a lot of people can do it really well, but it's not the be all end all. You can have a good convincing voice, but if there's no substance behind it, then it's going to fall flat anyway. Tom, what do you think on this? Having played a couple females, I know you're not the biggest voice person out there, but like, how did you handle this?
For me as a player, I didn't do it because there's a lot of mileage you have to do with the voice, and I'm not good with accents or change my voice too much. The best I can do is a squeaky goblin voice, and then all my monsters sound the same.
Hey, your goblin voice is money though, man.
Awesome.
But the one thing that I've had a few instances, especially as a DM, where I've had moments. I don't know if you guys both remember Joybell, the gnome cook at Nomengard. So Joybell was kind of that, similar to Brooke and some of my PCs that I play, where I just kind of fall into a character and I start like generating it. It's coming out of my mouth faster than I can think of who the character's supposed to be. And I dropped into like a Southern Belle accent. As I'm sure it was horrible to anybody who would know better, but I was able to. I wasn't focusing on like Sarah, we were saying, you can work on the high pitch, but doesn't always have to be what it needs to be. Maybe adding a bit of a lilt or some sort of accent to focus on where they're from, or a different identity than, it's just a female voice because it's a different octave. Yeah. And that might help you kind of transition a bit and also helps bring more of an identity to the character than just they are female, they have a high voice.
Yeah. I think you both should do an example of your females.
Oh, God.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you do Milo, Adam?
Oh, it's been so long. I can't do Milo.
Oh, no. Just think of a big hunkin' Rod right in front of you, and then Sarissa kind of clinging to his arm, looking at you.
So to clarify, Rod is short for Radamanthus, our barbarian. Just so people know what you're talking about. Just to clarify, give a little bit of context there, Sarah.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, man.
And
no, cut. Yeah, that'll do it for us this week. Now, with just some quick advice on that, and you brought up Milo, and the best advice that I've heard with regard to doing a female voice, number one, don't be fake in terms of going up into the falsetto. Like for a guy, like that, number one, that's hard to keep going for an entire campaign, as Tom alluded to, but also it sounds fake. What Sarah said initially was perfect in terms of a little breathier, like pitch your voice up, but don't go into the falsetto. So it's a higher pitch, a little breathy, and that gives that kind of more feminine quality to the voice that, even though it's still a male voice speaking, it gives enough color to that voice to kind of bring the image of a female into your mind. So that would be my suggestion. Also, Tom, one of the best things for us with Brooke was your role play online through Slack. So if your group does it, one of the biggest impacts on me as a fellow player was what Tom was doing with Brooke online. And that's where those feminine qualities really managed to come out, because he could describe what was going on and how she was saying things, and all those qualities really came out within Slack. So if you have any written portion of your TTRPG, that is a perfect area to dive into some of those differences in characters and genders to really bring them to life. So, Hangry Potato Man, you're you're in a common spot here. It's tough. Don't worry too much about it. It's all about having fun. The fact that you're asking these questions is probably the most important thing, and shows that you're on the right track. So good luck out there.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie, the news goblin, can mean only one thing. It's time for Potomac RPG News. So I have this article from Scott Baird over at thegamer.com titled "How Tabletop RPGs Broke Away from the Table and Brought People Together in 2020." I thought I'd bring this up, seeing as we're hopefully on our way towards vaccination over the next several months, and a return to the table is on the horizon. So in the article, it talks about how TTRPGs have innovated in moving into the online space, and specifically how it was able to grow despite its former somewhat dependence on in-person play. So Tom, looking back on 2020 and the use of online play, what impact have you seen during this move from the table to the screen? And what do you think happens in the industry as a whole when the pandemic is over?
So for me, I get to kind of go back to just kind of touch base on your statement before about how, it was easier to do the role play when it was through text and you could get the voice across. I started DMing, during this pandemic, online. So I've experienced a lot of the ease of being behind a screen when you're DMing, a digital screen instead of a paper DM screen. And for me, I'm interested to see how people who have started, because it has been a huge boom for the TTRPG community because of the easy access. There's a lot of online tools, online systems that allow people to be more accessible. It's much easier to turn on a computer than to drive or to try to get into one room. Especially for timing, we can play at 6 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night or something, and not have to worry as much. So it's a bit easier in that sense. So I wonder how it's going to be interesting, and I don't really have an answer for how things are going to delineate back into in person. Like I might not necessarily be as comfortable or be as confident DMing in person than as I am online. So that might be a big learning curve. Part of it is I am a visual learner, and I work better presenting visual things. So things with like mirror board and stuff, I can slap down, pictures and maps and give you guys, like I can give not only for to show you guys what's going on, but it helps me
keep track,
have talking points and keep track of things, because I get overwhelmed and lose track of where I'm at. And it's very reminiscent of when I was a TA and I would, teach labs and stuff, and I would have a lecture and I would have slides and like, this is, we're talking about animal cells, and here's a picture of an animal cell, and I can point to things and describe things in front of me. And that's a lot of that I've learned is translated into DMing. And I feel like it's a little bit harder because I can't, and especially when you're trying to do things on the fly, like, oh, players go to this forest, random encounter, pictures and tokens and maps of things like that. I can just easily, with a separate screen, do 30-second Google search, drag and drop, and I'm playing that.
Gotcha.
But I think that doing in person is going to be a lot harder, and on the fly, I think I'll feel like I have to prepare a lot more beforehand and be much more rigid with that than the more on the fly I can kind of, because I have the internet at my fingertips, and I can bring things in and share with you guys and kind of work from that.
Yeah, that lack of flexibility, I'm just thinking about that from when I DM'd. Like, there's just, having the ability just to modify like a name on the board or something like that, and to be able to visually reference as a player, that's really useful stuff that we put up there. Like being able to see all the dramatic people that are involved in this particular campaign as a player, I love. And then as a DM, if you need to adjust something that's hidden because something changed or whatever, or they went in a different direction, you don't have that at the table.
Yeah, well, and I know we talked about this a little bit multiple times over this pandemic. What do you think things look like when we are done with this? Like, I know, Sarah, you and I have talked in terms of we like the social aspect. Like, we like being around our group for that social back and forth. Tom, I know you really enjoy the online stuff because it has that flexibility as a DM. But as a player, are you looking forward to getting back to the table, or are you more comfortable with the no travel and being able to be on for multiple hours without having to worry about things? Like, where do you see it going for you?
As a player, I definitely want to be back in person. I miss you guys. Yeah. I want to be at the table with my pencil and paper and my real dice, and I can roll them, and we can all be drinking White Claw and talking about what's going on with the mini. I can print off real minis. I can bring real minis and be excited about that. And I just more of, as from a DM perspective, it's going to be a bit more challenging, both like prep wise, and I feel for me. But again, I started online as a DM. Like I haven't DM'd in real life. So it's going to be interesting.
It's a different skill set as well. Like, because when you're doing it over Miro board and everything, that's much more on the technical side and speed in terms of getting things on and off that board and moving stuff around. Whereas in person, maybe a little bit more of that improv, that dramatic theater kind of side of people takes more hold because you're responding to things in the moment around people rather than finding a map or a token or something like that. So I do wonder if we'll end up with a hybrid after all is said and done, that our dependence on things like the Miro board or D&D Beyond. I mean, we were already using D&D Beyond before the pandemic hit in person. I wonder if we'll see kind of this hybrid thing where we're still using the screen, still using Miro boards and stuff like that, but we'll be in person for the social aspect. It'll be really interesting to see.
There might be an influx, and I really do hope, as you know, I have hesitations of like DMing in person and everything like that, but as a player, I really want to play in person. And I really do hope that a lot of people who have gotten into the hobby during the pandemic are able to transition seamlessly in real life, into like IRL play.
Yeah.
Because and one thing that might happen, it very likely could happen, depending on people's financial means and tech savviness, is they might start going to more like the digital screen tabletop, where you could like do like digital maps and everything, but have the real mini sitting on it.
Yeah, like we used to do with that TV screen on the table.
Yeah,
Which
that was
wasn't
you need like a moving company. Poor Adam, he'd be bringing that in every week. But it added to it. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, Steve, Sarah, you got to get Steve on this. I mean, I think he's getting one of those wormwood tables. Maybe you can find a way to inset a TV into that or something.
I think there's probably going to be a wormwood table in our future at some point. We just we just need to get the right setup for it. So.
But I really liked using that screen. I know it was bulky and we had a bad angle on it, so it was hard to see sometimes. But that idea of having a monitor within your table specifically for battle maps was pretty cool, and would love to see that. I agree, Tom. I think that's kind of how it's going to be. I also hope that it's a seamless transition, because for a lot of people, not just us, I think D&D is that social opportunity that many of us lack. I'm not a big drinker. I don't go out to bars. I'm not really sociable in terms of, I'll just pop over for a little bit. I need something like game night in order for me to get excited about something. So that is my social time, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people. And it's really rewarding to have that be your social time. So hopefully once this is all over, we can get around the table and everybody can enjoy that social aspect once again. We'll see how it pans out, though. Fingers crossed that people keep wearing their masks and we get these vaccinations out so we can get back to the table. But for us, we're going to take a step out for a moment, but stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D, and they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user DM Lauren, who asks, advice for introducing transgender NPCs. I'm not LGBTQ plus myself, so I know I'm very limited in my experience, and I apologize for any ignorance here. Hi, I've been DMing for a while now, mostly using module material and therefore using those NPCs. I'm starting to branch off from the module we've been using, and that includes making my own NPCs. Obviously, it's important to me to include diverse NPCs, and I was wondering what is the best way to go about introducing a trans NPC. Because as far as I can tell, apart from addressing pronouns, most people don't discuss their gender identity with mere acquaintances. I know a simple fix would just be to say, this is X, a transgender dwarven fighter who uses she, her. But I tend to introduce characters more narratively. So I was wondering if there was a solution that fits that style. What would you suggest? So, interesting question here, Sarah. How would you go about introducing a transgender NPC?
So I really, really love this question. And I just want to preface this. I'm not transgender, so I'm going to try and answer this the best that I can. But I honestly feel like there's way too much emphasis on gender for this character, and here's why. If this character is transgendered and she is living the life that she believes she was always supposed to have, I don't think you need to call emphasis to that. You need to treat her like a woman, but perhaps someone who is less fettered than she used to be. If it's a more recent transition, then maybe there's a little bit more of this discovery and just I don't know. I'm trying to just like this ability to finally live the life that you always were supposed to have in the body that you were always supposed to have, and I don't think that that's going to be something that's telegraphed any more than, a cis female coming into the room. That being said, if there are ways that you want to sort of bring attention to the fact that you are have this sort of that you have transgender characters in your campaign, I think that is fabulous. And maybe there's ways like, if it was a magical transition, maybe, a magic user in the party can pick up some really, really heavy magic on that particular person that might make them suspicious. Stuff like that. Like, there are other ways to do it, I think. But I think as far as your character's concerned, she's a woman, and she's living her best life now. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that the best representation I saw of this was in the Adventure Zone by the McElroy brothers. They had a character, Loop, who was the sister of one of the main characters. And the way they did it was really cool because it was like nothing was said about it, but then in a flashback, it was kind of alluded to that the Loop was, biologically different at birth than what she was now, and that kind of flashback was an opportunity for them to explore that without it seeming like fake or put on or anything like that. And the way they did it was just so casual in terms of yes, of course it was like this. Why would it be any other way? And that's what I really loved about it. And I agree. If it's a cis male going, being introduced, he doesn't go, "Hey, I'm a man and I like woman," like that. You don't say that to anybody you introduce yourself to. So therefore, it shouldn't be that way for any other gendered individual. Mm-hmm. They're not going to say, what their sexual orientation is or that, they identify this way or that way with a mere acquaintance. So I think the flashback is probably the best way to introduce those ideas or that backstory and tell that story while making it seem real and not putting on a facade.
Yeah, or like a legend of a character, like, if maybe, I don't know why this group is there, but if they're looking for a particular person and that person has a male name and stuff like that, and that could be a cool way to kind of reveal. Or like there's a bounty on this person again. So there's all kinds of ways to still make that person important, but what the party knows is about a male character in the past. The other thing too is the NPC could maybe form in a relationship with one of the other characters, and maybe that would come out eventually. So
sure, yeah, especially as if that relationship intensifies to a point where that person wants to share
exactly
their background, their story with that player, and that would make sense in terms of how that comes about. So that's an excellent idea. Tom, any ideas on this front?
Again, I agree with Sarah a lot with, it's don't it doesn't need to be its own thing. You know, treat them like a person. You know,
Mhm.
this NPC is a person. You know, they are who they are, how they present themselves. You might, you know, describe them that would, you know, lead to that the players assuming one thing, but have them, you know, they don't act like the character doesn't announce it. It's not put in the forefront. And then they learn subtly, like, oh, okay, this is what their identity is, or how they see themselves, and how I see them now.
Mhm.
So because I'm just experiencing them as another person.
And similar to how Steve did it with Sildane, I think he did a great job about that, where he played kind of a non-binary, almost just kind of very fluid character. Yeah, wasn't really obvious what his character identified as, and that was
Mhm.
great. Like, yeah, and the way he played it was perfect, because as a real person, you wouldn't, you know, say to strangers, you know, hey, I'm this, that, and the other. You would just be yourself and be a normal person, you know,
Mhm.
and that's the way he played it. And I think he did that perfectly. So that would be our advice to you, DM Lauren, is, you know, don't make it as much of an issue. The pronouns are important, you know, make sure they're right. And the use of flashbacks or building relationships are a good time for that kind of stuff to come out, because that's when an actual person would probably share that information. So good luck out there. Would love to hear how your campaign is going. But, you know, we get into some heavy topics on the show, and you know, I think even though this is fun to talk about, it's a serious topic. So sometimes we just need to take a break from that seriousness and have some fun. So listeners, it's time for a palate cleanser. Welcome to the Palate Cleanser, where we clear our mind of the heavy stuff we've been talking about and catch our breath. We had a lot of fun a couple weeks back with Sarah and Steve doing this, so I thought it'd be nice to do it again. We're going to play a version of that, just with two friends instead of a married couple. You two,
no.
between Brooke and Mina, had a wonderful in-game friendship. So let's see if that translated to the players. Here's how it'll work. I'll ask each of you a few questions. Then we'll test how well the other person knows you by asking them what you put down for your answers. You two ready?
I am ready. Tom, don't let me down.
Oh, no pressure
No
at all.
pressure whatsoever. So, all right, let's get into it. So, what I did here is I gave both Sarah and Tom questions to answer, and they have done so. And now we're going to check in and see if they can get the other person's answers correct. So, Tom, we're going to go to you first for questions about Sarah. So, we asked Sarah, what non-D&D TTRPG does Sarah most want to try? What do you think?
Oh, I think because I know we've talked about this a lot with Matt, with Mutants and Masterminds. And I could see her wanting that, or Call of Cthulhu, because kind of the more like the investigative.
Not bad guesses, but they are completely wrong. The answer was Dune. Dune was what she most wanted
Really?
to try.
But for
out.
Tom's credit, I have to say Mutants and Mastermind was in there first, and then I remembered Dune from our podcast. I'm like, oh my God, no, I'm totally psyched about that. So I did change it because I am more passionate about Dune. But
you get credit for almost getting it right, Tom, but no points. So sorry. All right. This next question, Tom, I will allow you to go to foundfamiliar.com right now, because the question is, which Found Familiar coffee is Sarah's favorite?
Regular Knoll.
Ooh, no, I'm afraid not. It's
No?
Hex. Hex is, but that's a great guess. That's what I thought was her favorite at first as well. But Hex is her favorite Found Familiar coffee. So 0 for 2. Let's see if you can get the last one. If Sarah was an undead creature, what would she be?
Oh, I would say I'm stuck between a vampire or a lich, because Sarah would want to be like the hyper intelligent, like suave. I would say vampire.
Vampire? No, she wanted to be a mummy. A mummy, Sarah? You want to be a mummy? Who wants to be a mummy?
Vampire was my second choice. But like mummy, because like I don't know, they're really exotic and cool, and they have all this like I don't know history about them, and then they're kind of vulnerable at the same time, but really really super threatening. I don't know. I like a mummy.
So Sarah, real quick, to go along that vein, there's a mummy in the stat block, but there's also a mummy lord, which is actually a caster and hyper intelligent and kind of like a different version of a lich.
Oh, well, then I would be a mummy lady then.
Yes.
Mummy lady. There we go.
Yeah.
There's the official mummy lady. Well,
I definitely identify as female, so mummy lady.
So Tom, 0 for 3, but those were difficult questions. I am starting to question, though, the relationship between Brooke and Mina and just how meaningful that was here. Sarah, let's see if you can do any better with Tom's questions. First one, what was the last video game RPG that Tom played?
RPG that you played.
I actually got this wrong. I thought it was something else because he talked a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually bounced back and forth between a few of them, so.
Witcher, no, that's too old though. I didn't hear you talk about Cyberpunk at all. I don't think anyone wants to talk about that one. Oh my gosh.
Out of time. Need a guess.
No. Did you play the samurai one? I don't know. I'll just say Witcher. I know it's not it though.
The answer was Borderlands. I thought it was going to be Mass Effect Andromeda, which you talked about a lot, but apparently Borderlands is the last one that he played. Question number 2, how many sets of dice, roughly, does Tom own? Now, I will give you a 3-set cushion here.
16.
16? Well, you are correct. That fits within the 3 sets, so you got that one right. Well done. Next question. What was the class of Tom's first ever D&D character? He has talked about this on the show.
He has, too. What was your first character?
What was the class?
Was it a rogue? I don't remember.
It was not a rogue. It was a monk. A human monk that he played at that first. What was it? An Adventurers League?
Yeah, it was like an Adventurers League.
That's right.
Yeah. So, well, relax though, Sarah, because you have proved yet again that you know more about other people than they know of you. Well done. You have won the Palate Cleanser.
So here's the thing though, just to call it out, because you mentioned, you're like, oh, how does Brooke know Mina? This was a Tom versus Sarah question era. I feel like if this was a Brooke to Mina question set, I feel like this is
well, unfortunately, I didn't have access to many of the discussions that you guys had. And I'm not sure I really want to have access to it either. So that'll be for another show. But well done, guys. I appreciate you playing along. Let's get into the last question of the week. This post comes from Reddit user SG Traveler, who asks, what kind of NPC gender balance is there in your campaign? Do you pay attention to it? Confession time. I was just typing up a list of all the NPCs in my game when it occurred to me to look at the gender balance, specifically the number of non-men in the list. I did some quick math and got 37%. 37% non-men, mostly women with a couple non-binary / non-gendered people in the list as well, out of 150 named NPCs. This does not strike me as very good. And this is with something of a conscious effort on my part to include different types of people in my game, knowing that it's all too easy, especially as a man, to fall into the whole male as norm idea. My players do sometimes get surprised when they see a woman in an unexpected role, which might subconsciously lead me to use more men rather than interrupt the flow of the game. And I'm sure I am still unlearning the automatic process of making an NPC a man, especially if they're filling some kind of typically masculine role. At the same time, I imagine some games might have barely any women at all. I'd encourage those DMs to be more open to gender in their games. One thing I like to do is before I describe an NPC to my players, I take a second to think, can this NPC be another gender? Would that help the game and maybe get them to challenge their preconceptions and mine a little more? It oftentimes works great. Looking forward to bumping that percentage up. So have you ever looked at your campaign's NPC gender balance? Do you have any tips? What do you think about it? So Tom, you run a campaign now and soon to run a concurrent one, plus all the different campaigns we've run already as a group together. Is this something you've ever considered?
Not really. I haven't really stopped to think of like the actual statistical, breakdown of men and women NPCs as a DM, and I guess I would pay more attention to it as a DM. But I did notice running through the module, the two modules, both Dragon of Icespire Peak and Lost Mine of Fendelver, that it seemed like there was a good mix of NPCs of either male or female in positions of authority or power, or were essentially more valuable NPCs than just the commoner that you would see and forget about. I didn't really like, and the thing I've come across a lot, and again, this is a module, so not a custom campaign, but I would also, just like what I do with PCs, I would look up artwork and be like, okay, that's the bandit leader, okay, and then build from there. And there are a lot of it's more villains than actually like passive NPCs, because the passive NPCs are basically there for exposition dumps, and that's about it. They don't really stick around too long unless they're adopted by the party.
Yeah, which happens often.
Which happens more often than I expected. But I do kind of notice that there's kind of an even mix. Like I was like, oh yeah, this is this bandit leader, and kind of go into their background a bit and kind of add that extra layer of headcanon to flesh them out. And there are often a lot of a mix of men and women. And one thing that I think it kind of comes from is when I've noticed that when I play video games, as an example, I will alternate. If there's an option to play either gender, I will go play through as one gender, then go play through another gender, and basically alternate back and forth. And a lot of the time, the games, they don't really differentiate, other than maybe having a different term or pronoun with when talking with the other NPCs. And it kind of, like Skyrim being an example of one where they don't really differentiate, other than they might call you lad or lass as one point or another. And I just think of it as, okay, I'm building out the world, and it doesn't really matter what the gender is. You just start filling the people in, on their own.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about you, Sarah? Like, is this something that you've thought about, or did this you just DM'd the adventure yourself? Like, is that something you considered, or not really?
Oh yeah, I absolutely considered it. I definitely tried to have women in some prominent positions. Definitely, there were more women in my campaign than there were men. I think there's a part of me that's still making up for the 10-year-old who always had to play a male character. So it's probably why I tend to favor playing women a lot. Yeah.
Don't blame you one bit.
And also there's this sort of good girl attitude that is, well, not attitude, sort of pressure that has persisted throughout centuries, that, woman needs to be good and polite. And we're very recently now just seeing female protagonists who are very gray and anti-hero. Gillian Flynn writes some really, really beautiful ones like Gone Girl. And it's really, really refreshing to see females in roles that they're not good guys. Like, and I really like seeing that. So it's not like you have to be like the Disney princess. That's a good female, right? That's a protagonist. No, these women are very, very dirty and sometimes immoral, but also like very convincing characters. So I really also try to put women in the roles of the antagonist as well, because I think that also in our world we don't have a healthy mix of female antagonists, to the point that I suspect that when we do get a female antagonist, that there's overcompensation for like how malevolent she's going to be, or she just comes off as not really well written. Just happens to be like a female who does really bad things. I don't know. It's just like there's such a disproportionate representation of men in positions of power, whether it's good or whether it's like how many people have tried to take over the world in a Bond film, and I think only one was female, and everyone else was male. Like, stuff like that. So I really, sorry, I tangent. But I did that. So bring that back to my campaign. I always try to definitely make sure that the women are representing, and very often I will make my villains female. So, and you, Adam, you did a great job too, right? Representing women.
I don't know if it was a great job, but I certainly love the idea of both female protagonists and antagonists. I really like the females in power aspect of things. But yeah, in Siren's Call, the big bad was a female vampire who I hope was a little scary, but I really like the idea of that. And going with that, I don't know if I've ever considered the percentage basis of the different genders, and I know that it's tough as a cis male to get a good representation of all the different gender identities and stuff like that, just because you don't want to do something wrong. You don't want to make a mistake and seem rude or unthoughtful. So it really takes a lot of intention behind it to make sure that you're presenting it in an appropriate way. It's a little easier for female male kind of stuff, just because it's what we're exposed to most often. And it's unfortunate because I'd love to dive a bit more and include much more transgender or non-binary individuals into campaigns, but I think it's easier to do from the player side, like with Steve or with the different sexual orientations with the different characters that we've played. It's a little easier to kind of come down to that one person and say, okay, I'm going to play this, than it is to build this world where that stuff is a little more difficult to get into. But it's definitely something to think about. And same goes with things like race. I think with a lot of our campaigns, we've tried to make sure that it's not just white men and women, that are all the NPCs. Everything is very European centric when it comes to D&D, but I think we've done a pretty good job of mixing that up and making sure there's some decent representation. Certainly could go a lot farther in that, but it's really cool to see. So interesting thing to think about, huh?
And one thing too, is kind of because Sarah, when you were talking about more depth of not just the presence of male and female or different people, but also their roles as antagonist and protagonist, and it made me think of it back at some of how I've played my characters, and I have partially because growing up I saw a lot of like with both my mother and my sister, that them having to face gender norms, gender expectations, and the struggles they had to face, and also seeing part of that struggle being frail masculinity and trying to claim authority just because of their gender expectations. And in hindsight, now that I think about it, a lot of my female protagonists and antagonists normally have a bit more self-confidence, and because of that aspect of that in-lane aspect of they had to struggle to get there, to be in that position. They had to be more than anyone else was expecting them to be, whether for whatever role they're playing. But then a lot of the time in hindsight, I realized that a lot of my everything from a bandit to an NPC, a shopkeeper to another hero, who's male, normally has some sort of frail masculinity because they never had to try that hard. And then when they come up with adversity, they normally don't really, not all of them, but a lot of them don't really make the cut.
almost getting an aspect of bleed here where, some of our own personal experiences or what we've seen find their way maybe unconsciously into the characters that we create.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I definitely think that happens. I try not to let it, but I'm sure it does with many of my characters. It's fascinating.
Interesting question there from SG Traveler, and best of luck getting that percentage up from 37%. I think I think that's a great place to be, to work from, and I think it's great that you're asking those questions not only of yourself but of other people. But for us, that's going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@PotomacRPG.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/PotomacRPG. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/PotomacRPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Sarah and Tom. Love the conversation. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Tom.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
never stop playing. But what happens if he gets more than my husband did? Like, that's real friendship, right?
Oh boy.